I say that to say because sometimes what Nick Saban is saying about college football and NIL, 1,000% is true. It's also highly hypocritical because a couple of years ago, he's at Texas, of all places, talking to the Coaches Association in high school coaches in the state of Texas, saying, hey, man, my quarterback's making 7 figures, and he's bragging about it. Now you're in a situation where he's on Capitol Hill now that he's retired. By the way, didn't win a national title in those 3 years as well, or 3 seasons. He only made a playoff twice. He almost won a national championship beating Georgia, but Georgia overcame it. My only point in all of this is saying I agree with Nick. I think something has to give on some of the things like doing away with collectives, not letting collectives be a thing. Joe, let's not act like the playing field wasn't even, and this is really why Nick Saban is pissed off.
Look, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that I'm glad that we're making actual progress in having these discussions. I agree with you. I agree with you that Nick Saban, it is hypocritical for him for the amount of money that he made in his coaching career. And you mentioned his beach house and all that stuff. Coaching did very well for him. It did very, very well for him. As hypocritical as it might be, I don't think there's anything wrong with the statements that he's making, that the focus of college football right now is not on actually playing football. And it is detracting from the experience for the players. Again, I know the messenger of this doesn't exactly help, but if you listen to what he's saying, there is a lot of truth to him bringing up that NFL coaches are saying that players are coming into the league with less of an ability to handle adversity, less developed, less mature as they've been described. Those are real concerns because you go to kids that are not going to play in the NFL, that are trying to get NIL money, that are going on to getting hired for jobs that might not have the patience and the composure and the wherewithal to work within the modern work society. It is okay to be concerned that these kids are getting chewed up and spit out at a ridiculous rate right now because there is no control over how the system works. I am taking this for what he is saying, which is that we need very specific, strict, structured guidelines and some sort of a revenue share in order to make progress.
Here's the problem I have with that. What kids are being chewed up and spit out?
I could bring up the example of Gervion Dexter, who is supposed to guarantee part of his NFL contract. That's the first example that comes to mind.
Let me rephrase that. Is there a massive amount of kids that are having this issue in NIL?
This is something that's never going to get. Wait, this is something that would be very complex to report on, to follow and track guys that are graduating and determining if they're able to succeed in life after football. No, that is what I'm saying.
No, but you would have more reporting if more shitty stuff was going on, more than these handful of issues.
Joe, a lot of these kids finish football and then nobody cares about them. That's the whole point that we're bringing this stuff up.
It's not their job. Joe, well, first off,
that's why there's no reporting on it.
Joe, NIL's only been a thing for 40 years. What issues are they mostly having of giving kids money for their name, image, and likeness? What issue is there being a situation where a kid is making money for the first time ever in college sports?
Nick Saban is bringing up and talking about in these hearings, in this panel, discussing how, and it was brought up, the transfer portal aspect of this, kids that are constantly moving and bouncing to different schools, which falls in line with NIL because kids are going to leave if they feel like they're not getting the money that they deserve.
All right, stop right there. Which is his biggest gripe because it makes an even playing field for everybody else. Nick Saban, so many years ago, Joe, I remember a time where Alvin Kamara was his 5th running back. So he was able to control and stockpile. He can't do that now, okay? That is his massive issue, is what he's talking about. He didn't have control, okay? So he has an issue. Joe, I talked to a legislator today. Good luck with your collective bargaining agreement, because guess what? Any state or state school that gets state and federal funding can't have a collective bargaining agreement. They can't because it's state and federal funded. You can't have a union with state and federal funded grants and procedures. You can't let one body, meaning student body, have things that where student athletes cannot. My whole point in this is, I think here's where I go in all of this. I think that there's a massive problem in the media, and it's going to continue to come out until we get to decisions like when we finally get to the decisions where people are like, oh man, I can't believe they made these horrible decisions. Years and years down the road, Joe, the NCAA came out and tried to actually do something and regulate NIL. Pay for play is what, hold on, please just hold on and listen to me. They tried to do it. It got thrown out in court. If the Supreme Court and the federal court is already throwing out these things that Nick Saban is on Capitol Hill ranting about, what do you propose? Let me tell you another avenue as well. Everybody is saying, Nick included on Capitol Hill, that if you do a revenue share, which we'll get to more later, okay, if you do a revenue share, it will calm things down. Joe, it's not going to calm down A&M. It's not going to calm down Alabama. It's not going to calm down schools to pay for recruits to come to their school. It's just not going to happen. And so you get back to a point where, okay, there are people on a certain side, a party side, that is massively disagreeing with Nick Saban. Okay? And they are going to vote no. So we are kicking, no progress was made in this. So the NCAA does something and everybody goes, get their ass, Tennessee, which what everybody should have done is allowed the NCAA to investigate that ass, see what actually is going on, and let that case go to the Supreme Court so that we can have a ruling and get everything back to maybe where we can progress and move forward. But nobody wants to do that. Nobody really wants structure. Nick Saban is bitching, moaning, and complaining because he can't have control. And Joe, I will tell you, you said earlier that the messenger doesn't necessarily matter in so many words. I call bullshit when you have a $20 million mansion that you bought in the beginning of a season. It's hard for you to say that, well, players want to have these conversations, okay, about name, image, and likeness with me and the collective, which, by the way, I'm so glad you asked. On July the 1st of 2021, do you want to know what Nick Saban was doing at the University of Alabama? He was doing a commercial for Alabama's collective so that his team would get money. If you were so hell-bent and determined that you didn't want to have those conversations, it's your fault for allowing these things to happen. You could have been like Dabo and said, you know what, we're not going to play these games. You can do it, but once you're on our campus, you're on our campus. I think that y'all are bitching, moaning, and complaining about the wrong things, and the God's honest truth is, Nick said, this was the quote that I think killed it for me. You ready?
What?
I've been in college football and college sports for 50 years, and it's just not the way that I grew up in. You mean when players didn't get paid money? You made over $100 million in college football. Joe, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, and he's full of shit. Regardless if anybody believes it or not, he is full of shit. Now, last point for me. What he said, though, we got to figure something out. And Joe, you know what the crazy thing is, kicking it over to you? He didn't even give a proposal of what should happen.
But that's not why he's there for. He's not there to come up and solve the problem. He is an expert opinion that is brought up into this.
No. Bullshit. He was asked by Ted Cruz in the last question. I'm reading it right here. Coach, what would you do? He said, I think that we need to have further discussions on how to regulate NIL. Ted Cruz then asked him, what kind of regulations? He said, we'd have to have further discussions.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying that we need to keep talking about this. There's nothing wrong with that.
How many times does he have? This is his fourth time on Capitol Hill. If you know, Joe, what do you mean he
not everyone needs it? He is a former head coach. He is not an administrator. I'm going to him for the expert opinion to provide the context of what NFL coaches are saying about the players that are coming into the league and the interactions that he's having with family members and upcoming recruits. That's why he's brought there. I'm not bringing in Nick Saban because I want to hear what his proposal for fixing this is. I trust Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti. Heck, I'd even trust Charlie Baker
Then
more
why
than I
not
would
call
trust
them to Capitol Hill?
I don't know the whole back logic of why this was set up the way that it was. I'm sure that there's reasoning for it. I don't know politics enough and the political procedures enough to sit here and argue that question. But I completely disagree with the notion that you're just saying that Nick Saban went up there to bitch and moan because things got hard for him. He's not coaching anymore. Why does it matter if things got hard for him? He's got nothing to gain or to lose going up there. Is it just a bitch? You think he's got that in him that he would just go up there and bitch and complain so he could do it? I completely disagree.
Yes. Can I tell you why I know that he would? Because he bitched and moaned about Jimbo and Deion Sanders a couple years ago about them paying a player. Hold on. Paying a player $1 million. Meanwhile, I know for an outright fact, and this is something that happened, a top wide receiver flipped on signing day from one SEC school to Alabama. The kid tweeted a Hellcat and a contract. So
he is making comments about that stuff.
Please spare me. Please, dear God, spare me that he was not doing this shit when he could control it.
He was, those comments when he was making those, yes, were because he was being outcompeted. He was dealing with the monster that is now NIL in the transfer portal. Yes, he was complaining because there was a competitive advantage that was being altered. But again, now him sitting there and bringing all of this stuff up, there's nothing wrong with it. I think that
I never said that there was anything wrong with it.
I know that you're not, but I think that a lot of times, and I'm not calling homerism here on you. I'm not doing that. But I'm just saying that a lot of times in general, college football fans, and I have been one of these people who I did it all last season with all the Alabama games. I kept picking against them because of a bias against Nick Saban. Now that he's removed from college football, I think we need to recognize that he is able to provide us with some very, very important context. I personally think that it's disturbing that he brought up that when he brought recruits into his house, that the families and the recruits did not have just the general social awareness to understand that they don't need to be bringing up NIL dealings when they're being brought into their into Saban's house and bringing it up with his wife. That's not the setting to do it. I think that's truly disturbing.
And he lied his ass off when that shit
happened. Come on. We don't know that he's lying. That is a weirdly specific example.
Let me ask you a simple question. When he was paying kids before NIL was an issue, when were those conversations being had then?
Not in his goddamn house. And I also know wait. When you ask people who play college football, they were not, kids and families were not outwardly asking for money.
Bullshit.
It is not the same process because it's more out in the open. These kids can get away with asking for it out in the open.
Why did Bo Davis get a show cause in the SEC?
Why?
Because he was caught doing shit illegal for Nick. They have Nick literally texting Bo Davis, and Bo Davis got a show cause for it. What happened was a recruit got a bag of fucking cash, and that is what happened.
Okay, but we don't know that there was any type of negotiation. I'd be willing to bet that there was no certain type of negotiation.
That makes it even worse. What makes it, you know why it makes it worse for the player? Can I tell you why it makes it worse for the player? At least now there is a negotiation that says, well, you know what, motherfucker? I got Texas over here that's going to give me money. You better match. And if you don't, I ain't going there. And you know what? That is what ran him out of the sport. If you think for one iota whatsoever that he did not have these conversations about how much money it took.
I'm saying that he didn't. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that there's suddenly the setting in which that these conversations are having, that it is being just so direct and so transactional that nothing else matters, is concerning, and it's worth talking about. Him bringing it up is important because I think that there is so much truth to the type of people that are coming into college football and the way that they're handling it, and the way that I feel like nonstop, all we hear about when you talk about certain recruits making decisions, you hear about their uncle, or you hear about their father or their cousin.
Handlers.
That is there's typically certain relationships with kids that are overly influencing based on financial. And I'm not saying that it's bad that kids are getting money and that they're able to negotiate. All I'm saying is that we need to keep having these conversations about the problems that are being caused in order to put the regulations in so that kids can't just freely negotiate like this and then hop in the transfer portal whenever they're tied to a school.
You mean like what Nick Saban did in his contract, that if there was someone paid above him, that Alabama had to restructure his contract so he was the highest paid head coach in the country?
He signed a contract and was held accountable. He couldn't just decide in the middle of that contract, I'm going to step away and I'm going to go take over the job at Texas.
Right, stop. Let me ask you a question. You legitimately said when Nico Iamaleava, he had the opportunity to fly out with a spy group from California to Tennessee. You said that, right? Correct? Okay.
Yes.
You said that that's something that should be legal. So why is it now okay for Nico to have that same conversation with an NIL group, but when someone comes to Nick Saban and says, Coach, I'm having other teams that are telling me this, what are you offering? You legitimately.
That's not what I'm bringing up. That's not what I'm bringing up.
Do you really think that Nico Iamaleava did not have a conversation with Josh Heupel about
They did. They obviously did. And I'm not disagreeing with that aspect of it.
Okay, but you legitimately said 2 weeks ago that was okay. And now you're saying that it's not. You can't pick and choose now.
Okay, but that's not what I'm bringing up here. I'm bringing up the nature of, again, it is a part of a visit where they're at the head coach's house, and you've got parents asking his wife how much money is being given to their son, which is a completely fine conversation.
Are you 100% sure that's true, Joe?
I don't have any evidence to prove that it's not. I have evidence of a context.
It's true either.
I at least have context of a story of it being brought up by Nick Saban.
But see, here's the problem.
You think he lied in court to bring that up? You think that he lied in court?
He's not under oath.
But what does he get out of lying in court? What does he get out of in a political setting like that, going up there and lying?
Because
nothing.
I think it doesn't damage his legacy because of an more even playing field.
If somebody catches him doing that and lying, I would argue that would seriously damage his credibility and his legacy if he was caught going up there and lying.
You would have to prove that, and he knows that nobody's going to do that to try to prove him. It's not something that Miss Terry's not going to be on the stand, and they're not going to be under oath.
My point is, though, that there is a time and a place to have those negotiations and to have those conversations.
You mean like the time that Reggie Bush got a house from USC?
That was with an agent. That was with an agent.
It doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't
wait,
matter.
Can I finish what I'm trying to say here with those conversations? There is the equivalent of this is if you were being offered and courted for a new job, those conversations would happen outside of work in a meeting with the new company. The money would be offered, and then you would approach your new in a work setting and then move forward. Whatever it might be, there are certain settings for that to happen. You don't go show up at your boss's house and start asking, well, so-and-so offered me more money. Can you match it? That's what I'm saying, is that it's weird and it's concerning that is where they're deciding to do this, that there is an obliviousness to there's no social awareness of understanding how these things should be handled. And then it's just so blatantly out in the opening. That's why we need structure. That's why we need rules. There needs to be certain.
How do you change that?
There needs to be certain. I've said this before. There needs to be contracts where you're locked in for 2 to 3 years, and you have to negotiate during certain periods of time. Why? Why can't I?
The spirit of NIL, which you alluded to with Nico Iamaleava, is about name, image, and likeness.
It needs to not be NIL. It needs to be a revenue share, and I've said that before.
No, but the problem, goddammit, with that is a revenue share doesn't stop a fucking thing when it comes to NIL and boosters paying for recruits to be there. Your issue is not. Everybody keeps talking about revenue share changing something. Revenue sharing's not going to change a goddamn thing.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, because it can be more easily structured.
What's happening in the NFL right now? It's called what?
The collective bargaining agreement.
Free agency.
Yeah, it's free agency.
Okay. So what are they doing? They're spending shitloads of money to get their team better, correct?
Yeah. And none of those players could negotiate until their contracts were up.
Jesus, sweet God alive. Revenue sharing does not stop any booster from making their team and paying recruits to get them there. What Nick was saying was, I'm having conversations with recruits in my own house. He's talking about recruiting in NIL. He's talking about collectives. The first thing that needs to be enacted in all this is that collectives need to go bye-bye. That's where you need to
I don't disagree with that. And that's why
that's the conversation that Nick is having. TV revenue money has absolutely nothing.
You have to offer a counter solution here, though, in order to, if you remove the NIL collectives, then there is now no organized pool of money for these players. So the players, and legally, you're not going to be able to have any grounds to remove that unless there's money coming from somewhere else. Revenue sharing is something that would be blatantly in front of our eyes, and there would be set dollar amounts that players would be getting.
Do you think that stops boosters from giving millions of dollars to recruits to make their team better? Yes or no?
No, but I believe that if there is revenue sharing in place, then you can hold schools and boosters accountable for trying to offer money to sway decisions.
You can't do that because it literally in federal court a month ago got shot down. Please stop. And you rooted it on. You rooted it on. I can go get the episode for you. You cheered it on. Rocky Top.
The aspect I cheered on the aspect of the NCAA not being able to restrict the open market for players. That's not the same thing.
Screw the NCAA for a minute. The bottom line issue became, when that went through, is quite honestly that pay for play is legal. So if, like I told you, what was my counter argument? I said, Joe, who is the top recruit at Notre Dame? If I called him right now, got him on a plane, flew into Baton Rouge and said, you're coming to LSU, there's not a goddamn thing that you could do about it. You remember
that's why we need revenue sharing, so that we can put together contracts where a kid can't just walk up and do that. You need a contract. There's no contracts.
No, I think you're complete. It's vastly gone over your head.
No, it's not.
Yes, it does. You know why? Because we're talking about a recruiting issue of bringing a player there. TV revenue is going to be the same across the board. Let's just say every kid, every scholarship player makes $50,000 a year. Do you really think that the school that's going to add on to that is where players aren't going to go? That's my point.
I get what your point is, but I'm trying to bring up the fact that if you have some sort of salary, some sort of amount of money that is being given to players, you are then able to be more restrictive in what happens with them outside of or everything that happens with NIL.
Then you're naive of how that game's going to go.
They can't create regulations right now because everything is not. There's no rules. There's none. So I am advocating for the creation of rules.
You mean like what the NCAA tried to enforce a month ago?
They tried to enforce rules that after they had been. They tried to enforce rules after the fact.
Oh, you're stuck. You know why you're stuck?
I'm not stuck.
You're stuck because this is what the media does. What the media does is they see where the flag is blowing and they go that direction, not looking down the line of where things are going to be.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.